The fluorescent lights of Solar System Trade Negotiation Station 42 flickered momentarily as Marlo Venn strode down the corridor. The Zextian trade director's 4 sets of appendages moved in perfect synchronization, creating an unsettling rhythmic click against the metal floor. His outer membrane glistened with expensive synthetic oils, a display of wealth as intentional as the rare metals adorning his communication devices. Status report. Venn demanded his translator module, converting the series of clicks and whistles into the station's standard dialect. His assistant, a nervous Quantian, with translucent skin that revealed his rapidly pulsing circulatory system, hurried alongside him. The Grand Trade Alliance Summit preparations are on schedule, Director. Security protocols have been implemented across all sectors. However, there is still concern about the humans. Venn interrupted, his outer membrane darkening slightly in annoyance. Their delegation is insignificant. They control barely 3 systems, yet they demand equal representation. Not just that, sir, the assistant continued, voice lowering. Some board members express concern about your new security measure. Venn stopped abruptly, causing his assistant to stumble forward. My personal security is not a matter for board discussion. The contract is legally binding under Article 47 of Interspecies Employment Rights. The assistant's skin turned a pale blue. Yes, Director. I merely thought— You're not paid to think, Venn said, resuming his pace. You're paid to ensure tomorrow's summit proceeds without incident, allowing me to finalize the 73 trade agreements that will solidify Zextian dominance in the outer rim markets. They reached an ornate door at the end of the corridor. Venn pressed his appendage against the biometric scanner, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. The room beyond was dimly lit, the temperature noticeably lower than the rest of the station. Leave us, Venn ordered his assistant, who seemed all too eager to comply, backing away quickly as the door closed. The room was spacious, decorated with artifacts from dozens of world's trophies of Venn's negotiation victories. But it wasn't the rare collectibles that drew attention. It was the figure positioned in the far corner, so still, it might have been mistaken for a statue. Night Stalker, Venn called out, his voice echoing slightly in the chamber. Status report. The figure moved a fluid, impossibly fast motion that brought it from the corner to the center of the room in less than a heartbeat. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, the Maruran apex predator was a marvel of evolutionary perfection. Its exoskeleton shimmered with an iridescent black finish that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 4 primary limbs ended in retractable claws, capable of shredding military-grade armor, while secondary appendages housed specialized sensory organs that could detect heartbeats through walls. The most unsettling feature, however, was its face, if one could call it that. What appeared to be a smooth mask was actually a complex arrangement of sensory plates that shifted and realigned as the creature processed information. Where eyes should be, there were only recessed sensors glowing with a faint amber light. No threats detected. Night Stalker responded, its voice, a surprising baritone produced by specialized vocal organs designed to mimic the communication patterns of prey species. Station security protocols are inadequate. 17 potential breach points identified. Venn's membrane rippled with satisfaction. Excellent. And the contract parameters? Night Stalker's sensory plates shifted slightly. Contract parameters accepted and filed. Primary directive: ensure the physical safety of Marlo Venn during the Grand Trade Alliance Summit and all related events. Secondary directive: eliminate any threats to Director Venn's commercial interests. Tertiary directive: maintain discretion regarding methods employed. Venn circled the predator slowly. And your dietary requirements, have they been met? The provided specimens were adequate, Night Stalker replied flatly. Synthetic protein supplements have been assimilated. Good, good, Venn said, stopping in front of the creature. You understand that tomorrow's summit is crucial. My enemies would love nothing more than to see me fail, or better yet, disappear entirely. Night Stalker remained motionless. The contract is clear. Your survival ensures payment completion. Ven laughed, a harsh sound that his translator rendered as a series of metallic clicks. Always so literal. That's why I chose your species. No messy loyalties or moral complications, just pure biological efficiency. He moved to his desk and activated a holographic display. Memorize these figures. They are the delegates who pose the greatest potential threat. The display cycled through various species: a tentacled Dracovian, known for aggressive corporate takeovers; a crystalline Helix collective, with competing mineral rights; claims a gaseous Venthian, whose corporation had recently lost a significant contract to Ven's conglomerate. Your presence alone should deter any foolish actions, Ven continued. The reputation of Maruran apex predators precedes you. Most species have enough evolutionary self-preservation to... A sharp chime interrupted him, followed by his assistant's nervous voice over the intercom. Director Ven, I apologize for the interruption, but there's an urgent matter requiring your immediate attention. Ven's membrane darkened again. What could possibly be urgent enough to disturb me now? An Earth delegation has arrived, sir. They're requesting an immediate audience regarding your security personnel. The Zextian director froze momentarily, then turned to Night Stalker. How interesting. It seems the humans have somehow learned about our arrangement. His voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper. This could provide an excellent opportunity to demonstrate your capabilities. Come, let's greet our unexpected guests. The reception area of the station's diplomatic wing was designed to accommodate multiple species, simultaneously adjustable gravity settings, atmospheric composition controls, and temperature regulation systems that could shift from cryogenic to plasma hot in seconds. Currently, it was set to standard Earth norm conditions, a courtesy to the unexpected visitors. The three humans stood in the center of the room, appearing remarkably calm, despite being surrounded by various station security officers. Ven noted with interest how the other species gave the humans a wider berth than protocol required. Evolutionary memory. Perhaps many spacefaring species had ancestral myths about human persistence and adaptability. Ambassador Adira. Ven greeted the central figure, a tall woman with dark skin and a commanding presence. What an unexpected pleasure. I wasn't aware Earth had been invited to the pre-summit consultations. Ambassador Adira smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. Director Ven, we appreciate you seeing us without an appointment. I'm afraid our visit is prompted by some concerning intelligence. Ven's translator rendered his response in a neutral tone, masking his irritation. Intelligence? How intriguing! And what intelligence brings Earth's finest all the way to Station 42, a mere day before formal negotiations begin? The ambassador's gaze shifted past Ven to where Night Stalker stood perfectly still and seemingly uninterested in the proceedings. I believe you know exactly why we're here, Director. The Grand Trade Alliance explicitly prohibits the employment of Class A biological weapons during official proceedings. Ven's membrane rippled in what might have been amusement. Biological weapons, I assure you, Ambassador, you are mistaken. This is merely my personal security detail, fully licensed and contracted according to interspecies employment regulations. The second human, a shorter individual with a collection of scanning devices attached to their utility belt, stepped forward. Dr. Hale, xenobiological specialist. They introduced themselves. Director, that is a Maruran apex predator, specifically a Night Stalker variant. Its biological capabilities classify it as a living weapon under Section 12 of the Alliance Charter. The third human, a muscular individual with military bearing, maintained a watchful position slightly behind the others. Ven noted how their hand remained casually near what was likely a concealed weapon. Raiden Earth Defense Force. They stated, simply offering no further introduction. Ven spread his upper appendages in a gesture of innocence. A security consultant with specialized biological adaptations is hardly a weapon, Dr. Hale. Night Stalker has a signed contract licensing documents, and even a station visitor's permit. He produced a data tablet displaying a series of official-looking documents. Everything is in order. Ambassador Adira accepted the tablet, scrolling through the documents with practiced efficiency. Impressive paperwork, Director. However, the spirit of the Alliance regulations clearly. The letter of the law is what matters in trade negotiations, Ambassador Ven interrupted smoothly. As you well know, unless Earth is suddenly advocating for interspecies employment discrimination. The ambassador handed the tablet back, her expression unreadable. Very well. We've registered our concern. However, we insist on having our own security personnel present at all meetings involving Earth's interests. Of course, Ven agreed readily. The summit is about cooperation after all. He turned slightly toward Night Stalker. Perhaps you'd like to meet my security consultant, I assure you. Despite appearances, Night Stalker is quite civilized. Dr. Hale's equipment began to emit a series of soft beeps as they directed it toward the predator. Fascinating. The biomechanical adaptations alone are extraordinary. The predator remained motionless as the humans approached, but Ven noticed something unusual. The sensory plates on Night Stalker's face were realigning rapidly, focusing intently on the humans, particularly on Raiden, whose posture had subtly shifted to one ready for immediate action. Night Stalker, Ven commanded, monitor these humans during their stay on the station. Ensure they don't lose their way. For the first time since the humans entered, Night Stalker moved. It was a subtle shift, barely perceptible, but Ven had spent enough time with the creature to recognize hesitation. Contract parameters specified personal protection. Night Stalker stated, its voice eerily calm. Surveillance was not included in the agreement. Ven's membrane darkened with anger. The contract specifies that you will follow my directives regarding security matters. These humans are a potential security concern. A tense silence followed, as Night Stalker's sensory plates continued their rapid realignment. Finally, it spoke. Acknowledged. Surveillance parameters accepted. Ambassador Adira watched this exchange with evident interest. Your consultant seems to have a strong understanding of contractual boundaries, Director. How refreshing. Ven forced his membrane to resume its normal coloration. Indeed. Now, if you'll excuse us, I have preparations to complete before tomorrow's summit. Night Stalker will ensure you find your assigned quarters without incident. As the group departed, Ven's assistant approached cautiously. Sir, was it wise to assign the predator to monitor the humans directly? The regulations state whatever I interpret them to state, Ven snapped. Besides, I'm curious to see how our Apex friend responds to extended contact with humans. There's something interesting about their interaction. The assistant's skin pulsed with anxiety. Sir, there are rumors about humans and apex predators. Evolutionary studies suggest, superstitious nonsense, Ven dismissed. Night Stalker is bound by contract, and the Marurans take their legal obligations with deadly seriousness. Now, prepare the preliminary documentation for tomorrow's rare mineral rights negotiations. I want the Helix Collective cornered before they realize what's happening. As the assistant hurried away, Ven gazed down the corridor, where the humans and Night Stalker had disappeared. Despite his confident words, something about the interaction troubled him. The Predator's momentary hesitation was unprecedented. He made a mental note to review the contractual enforcement clauses before retiring for the night. Just to be safe, Night Stalker moved silently through the station's maintenance tunnels, its specialized sensory organs mapping the complex network of passages with perfect accuracy. The humans had been escorted to their assigned quarters 3 hours ago, but the Predator had not returned to Ven as expected. Instead, it had embarked on a systematic exploration of the station's security systems, ostensibly to fulfill its surveillance directive. In reality, Night Stalker was troubled. The encounter with the humans had triggered something unexpected, a biological response that overrode certain aspects of its contractual obligations. The sensation was unfamiliar, almost like the predatory instinct that activated during a hunt, but instead of identifying the humans as prey, its evolutionary recognition systems had categorized them as something else. Night Stalker paused at a junction, extending its sensory appendages to detect any nearby life forms. Finding none, it continued its journey toward the human quarters. The contract with Ven was legally binding and fulfilled all requirements of Maruran employment law. Yet the Predator found itself analyzing loopholes and conditional clauses with unusual intensity. The humans were awake. Even through the reinforced walls of their assigned quarters, Night Stalker could detect their heartbeats, respiration patterns, and pheromone signatures. They were not resting as most species would before an important diplomatic event. They were preparing. Silently, Night Stalker positioned itself within an access panel directly adjacent to the humans' common area. Through specialized auditory organs, it could hear their conversation clearly. "The Predator is listening," Raiden stated, simply cleaning what appeared to be a disassembled energy weapon. Ambassador Adira nodded without looking up from her data tablet. "I'd be disappointed if it weren't. That's partly why we're having this conversation." Dr. Hale spread several holographic displays showing biological scans. "The Maruran's sensory capabilities exceed even our highest estimates. Evolutionary perfection for stalking and ambush hunting across virtually any terrain. But the fascinating aspect is its recognition systems." "Explain," Raiden prompted, reassembling the weapon with practiced efficiency. "Apex predators develop specialized neurological patterns to identify threats, prey, and potential competitors," Hale continued. "The Night Stalker variant has the most sophisticated recognition system documented. It doesn't just identify species, it categorizes them based on perceived threat level and predatory capacity." Ambassador Adira set down her tablet. "And humans register how exactly?" Hale smiled. "That's the interesting part. According to my scans, we register as neither prey nor threat. We register as competing apex predators." Night Stalker's sensory plates shifted unconsciously. The human was correct, a fact that disturbed the Maruran more than it cared to acknowledge. Humans lacked the obvious biological weapons of a predator species: no venomous delivery systems, inadequate natural armor, limited sensory range, and physical strength that barely registered compared to a Maruran's capabilities. Yet something about them triggered the recognition patterns reserved for equal competitors. It was biologically illogical. "So it respects us?" Raiden asked, activating the power cell on the reassembled weapon, which emitted a soft hum. "Not exactly respect," Hale clarified. "More like evolutionary recognition. Humans don't look dangerous by conventional metrics, but our persistence, hunting adaptations, tool usage, and pack coordination strategies mirror apex predator behaviors. We're recognized as fellow hunters not by conscious thought, but by deep evolutionary programming." Ambassador Adira stood and walked to the center of the room. Her next words were spoken slightly louder, clearly intended for their hidden observer. "Which means Marlo Ven has made a fundamental miscalculation. You can't simply purchase the loyalty of an apex predator and direct it against another apex species. The contract might be binding, but biology runs deeper than paperwork." Night Stalker remained perfectly still, processing this direct address. The human was baiting it, attempting to create doubt about its contractual obligations. Yet the statement resonated with the Predator's own internal conflict. The conversation continued, with the humans now discussing Ven's trade practices, particularly his manipulation of rare mineral markets and alleged sabotage of competing companies. Night Stalker cataloged this information automatically, as required by its surveillance parameters. "His security is impressive," Raiden noted, "but there's a vulnerability in the atmospheric regulation system. If someone wanted to introduce a fast-acting sedative gas—" "We're not here to assassinate a trade director," Ambassador Adira chided. We're here to ensure fair representation for Earth's interests and investigate potential violations of Alliance regulations. Of course, Ambassador Ryden agreed smoothly. I merely point out vulnerabilities as a professional courtesy. Dr. Hale manipulated one of the holographic displays, expanding what appeared to be a biochemical analysis. The more immediate concern is what happens when Ven realizes his hired predator isn't as controllable as he believes. Ambassador Adira nodded. He's not known for accepting failure gracefully. His last security chief was found drifting in an escape pod, with all life support systems mysteriously malfunctioning. Night Stalker processed this new information with growing unease. The contract included no termination clauses protecting the Predator's interests, an oversight that suddenly seemed significant. A subtle alarm suddenly vibrated through the station's structure, so slight that most species would never detect it. Night Stalker's sensory organs, however, instantly recognized the pattern, a security alert deliberately muted to avoid general notice. Without conscious decision, the Predator silently retreated from its observation point, moving rapidly through the maintenance tunnels toward the source of the alert. Something had triggered the station's internal sensors, something the regular security forces were attempting to handle quietly. As Night Stalker navigated the complex network of passages, it became aware of another presence in the tunnels, multiple presences moving with the deliberate stealth of trained infiltrators. The Predator slowed, extending all sensory appendages to gather maximum information. 6 intruders. Zextian physiology, armed with energy weapons and carrying specialized equipment designed for silent entry. Their movement patterns indicated military training, and their biochemical signatures suggested combat stimulant usage. Most concerning was their direction of travel. They were heading directly toward Ven's private quarters. Contractual obligation demanded immediate intervention. Night Stalker prepared to intercept the intruders, calculating the optimal ambush point, where the tunnel narrowed 30 meters ahead. Yet, something made the Predator hesitate. A nagging suspicion formed from the fragments of information gathered during surveillance. The timing was too convenient. 6 hours before a major summit with Earth representatives unexpectedly present, and a covert team infiltrating specifically toward Ven's location, the probability calculations did not align with random chance. Night Stalker made a decision. Rather than engaging the intruders, it would observe. The contract required protection, but not immediate intervention if surveillance might yield valuable security information. The Predator followed silently as the infiltration team reached a junction near Ven's quarters. One of them extracted a communications device and spoke in whispered Zextian dialect, a dialect Night Stalker recognized as a military variant, not commonly used in civilian circles. Perimeter secured. Proceeding to primary target in 3 minutes. Confirm authorization code. There was a pause. Then a response came through the device, a voice Night Stalker recognized instantly, causing its sensory plates to realign in surprise. Authorization confirmed. Remember, it must appear as an Earth assassination attempt. Plant the evidence as instructed. All witnesses eliminated. It was Ven's voice. The Predator processed this revelation with cold efficiency. The logical conclusion was inescapable. Ven had orchestrated an attack on himself, or more precisely a false attack meant to implicate the Earth delegation. Night Stalker's contract parameters suddenly seemed insufficiently precise. Protect Ven from genuine threats? Yes. But was Ven himself a threat to Ven's interests? The logical paradox created a moment of genuine hesitation, something the Predator had rarely experienced. The infiltration team was moving again, approaching Ven's quarters from a service entrance. They carried what appeared to be explosive devices and forged identification tags bearing Earth Defense Force insignia. Night Stalker made its decision. The contract required protecting Ven's physical safety and commercial interests. A false flag operation that would likely result in interspecies conflict jeopardized both long-term. The Predator would intervene, but not in the way Ven anticipated. Moving with impossible speed, Night Stalker backtracked through the maintenance tunnels emerging near the human quarters. Rather than entering directly, it triggered the environmental alert system outside their door, a subtle signal that would be recognized as an emergency by any experienced space traveler. Within seconds, the door slid open, revealing Raiden in full combat stance, weapon drawn. The soldier's reaction time was impressive for a human. "We have a situation," Night Stalker stated simply, its voice modulated to project calm authority. "Director Ven has deployed a strike team to stage an Earth assassination attempt. They will reach his quarters in approximately 2 minutes." Ambassador Adira appeared behind Raiden, already fully dressed despite the late hour. "And you're telling us this? Why exactly?" "The contract specifies protection of Ven's interests. A false flag operation triggering diplomatic incidents with Earth is counter to those interests." Dr. Hale joined them carrying what appeared to be scientific equipment, hastily converted for defensive purposes. "That's quite an interpretation of your contractual obligations." Night Stalker's sensory plates shifted in what might have been the Maruran equivalent of a shrug. "Contract law contains necessary ambiguities. We have 1 minute and 40 seconds to intercept." Raiden glanced at the ambassador, who nodded once. "Lead the way, Predator." The group moved swiftly through the station corridors, Night Stalker guiding them through service passages to avoid regular security patrols. The Predator noted with interest how the humans moved Raiden with the fluid efficiency of a trained hunter Adira, with quiet determination, and Hale with surprising adaptability for one seemingly specialized in scientific endeavors. 6 targets armed with energy weapons and explosives," Night Stalker informed them as they approached the final junction. "Their objective appears to be staging an attack, not assassination." Raiden checked his weapon. "Capture rather than eliminate." "Preferable," Ambassador Adira confirmed. "We need evidence of Ven's involvement." Night Stalker extended its sensory appendages once more, mapping the positions of the infiltration team. They have separated into 3 pairs. 2 are placing explosives near atmospheric controls, 2 are approaching Ven's sleeping chambers, and 2 are establishing a retreat route. "Dr. Hale and I will handle the explosives," the ambassador decided. "Raiden, you and our Predator friend take the pair heading for Ven." Raiden raised an eyebrow. "You trust it that much?" Ambassador Adira met Night Stalker's amber sensors with a steady gaze. "I trust evolutionary biology. Let's move." The group split up, with Night Stalker leading Raiden through a narrow maintenance shaft that opened directly into Ven's private quarters. As they moved, the Predator became aware of subtle changes in the human's biochemistry: increased adrenaline, focused attention, controlled respiration. Battle readiness, but without the chaotic emotional responses that many species exhibited. "They will enter through the environmental control panel," Night Stalker whispered as they reached the exit point. "Standard formation leader on the left." Raiden nodded, positioning himself with practiced efficiency. "Non-lethal takedown." "As you prefer," the Predator responded, though their orders likely include elimination of witnesses. The human's expression hardened. "Then we don't give them the chance." The maintenance shaft cover slid silently aside as Night Stalker detected the approach of the infiltration team. The Predator could hear the faint click of their equipment and smell the distinct odor of Zextian combat stimulants. The moment the first infiltrator began removing the environmental panel, Night Stalker moved. To human perception, the Predator seemed to simply vanish, reappearing behind the infiltrators in a blur of motion. Before they could react, the Predator had disabled the leader with a precise strike to a neural cluster, painful but non-lethal. Simultaneously, Raiden emerged from the shaft, firing a targeted stun pulse that dropped the second infiltrator instantly. The entire encounter lasted less than 3 seconds. "Efficient," Raiden commented, securing the unconscious Zextians with restraints. "Your timing was acceptable," Night Stalker replied, already moving toward the door. "The others will have heard the disruption in their communications." A sudden crash from the corridor confirmed this assessment. Night Stalker's sensory organs detected a rapid exchange of energy weapon fire, and the distinctive sound of Dr. Hale's improvised defensive device activating. "Ambassador requires assistance," the Predator stated, moving toward the door. Before they could exit, the door slid open, revealing Marlo Venn fully awake and pointing an elaborate energy pistol directly at them. "How disappointing," the Zextian director said, his membrane dark with anger. "I had such high expectations for your performance, Night Stalker." The Predator remained perfectly still, sensory plates realigning to assess the new threat. "The contract specified protection of your interests. Your actions endangered those interests." Venn's translator rendered his laugh as a metallic bark. "My interests are whatever I define them to be, Predator. The contract gives me full discretionary authority." "A legal interpretation that would not survive arbitration," Night Stalker responded calmly. "There won't be any arbitration," Venn said, his weapon humming as it charged to full capacity. "Only a tragic story of how Earth assassins killed a prominent trade director with their tame Predator as the perfect scapegoat." Raiden had shifted slightly during this exchange, moving incrementally toward a position that would provide a clear line of fire. Night Stalker noted the movement, but gave no indication, keeping Venn's attention focused on itself. "The station security recordings will contradict your narrative," the Predator pointed out. Venn's membrane rippled with amusement. "What recordings? There was unfortunately a complete system failure in this sector. Suspected Earth sabotage, of course." A sudden commotion in the corridor drew Venn's attention for a fraction of a second, just enough time for Night Stalker to move. With blinding speed, the Predator intercepted the energy blast, meant for Raiden, its specialized exoskeleton absorbing the impact with minimal damage. Simultaneously, Raiden fired his own weapon, the stun pulse, catching Venn squarely in his central nervous cluster. The Zextian director collapsed, his membrane fading to a sickly gray. "You blocked his shot," Raiden observed, securing Venn with the same restraints used on the infiltrators. Night Stalker's sensory plates shifted in what might have been discomfort. "The contract requires protecting his physical safety. It does not specify from whom." The door slid open again, revealing Ambassador Adira and Dr. Hale, both looking somewhat disheveled, but uninjured. Behind them were the remaining 4 infiltrators, securely restrained and under the watchful eyes of station security officers. "It seems we've missed the excitement in here," the ambassador commented, surveying the scene. Hale immediately moved to examine Night Stalker, scanning the area where the energy blast had impacted. "That should have caused significant tissue damage. Your exoskeleton's energy dispersion capability is remarkable." "A useful adaptation," the Predator acknowledged. "The situation is contained." Ambassador Adira nodded. "Station security responded to our alert. Once they realized what was happening, they were quite cooperative. Apparently Venn isn't particularly popular among his colleagues." One of the security officers, a tall Quantian, stepped forward. "We've secured the command center and notified the Alliance Oversight Committee. They're dispatching representatives immediately." The officer glanced nervously at Night Stalker. "What about the consultant?" All eyes turned to the Predator, who remained perfectly still under their scrutiny. "A contractual review seems appropriate," Night Stalker stated finally. "Director Venn's actions constitute a material breach of our agreement." Ambassador Adira stepped forward, her expression carefully neutral. "Perhaps we could discuss alternative arrangements." The summit chamber was filled to capacity, representatives from over 30 star systems crowded around the massive negotiation table. The events of the previous night had sent shockwaves through the diplomatic community, with emergency sessions called to address the implications of a trade director attempting to frame another species for assassination. Marlo Venn sat at one end of the table, his membrane a dull gray, despite the expensive synthetic oils. His appendages were bound with ceremonial restraints, signifying his status as an accused awaiting judgment. Beside him sat a legal representative, a fellow Zextian, whose nervous membrane pulsations revealed the difficulty of their position. At the opposite end sat the Earth delegation, now expanded to include several additional representatives summoned after the incident. Ambassador Adira maintained a composed demeanor, despite the chaotic proceedings, occasionally consulting with her team in hushed tones. Most striking, however, was the presence beside the Earth delegation. Night Stalker stood slightly behind Ambassador Adira's chair, its imposing figure drawing constant glances from the assembled diplomats. The Alliance Oversight Committee chairperson, a venerable Helix collective, whose crystalline structure shimmered with accumulated wisdom, called the chamber to order. We convene this emergency session to address the serious allegations against Trade Director Marlo Venn. The chairperson's harmonized voice resonated. The evidence presented indicates an attempted false flag operation designed to implicate Earth in an assassination plot. Venn's legal representative rose. My client maintains that this was a security exercise that was misinterpreted by overzealous Earth representatives. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the chamber. A security exercise requiring forged Earth military identification and explicit orders to eliminate witnesses. Ambassador Adira questioned, her tone coolly professional, despite the absurdity of the claim. The recorded communications between Director Venn and the security team have been authenticated by 3 independent sources, the chairperson added. The intent seems quite clear. Venn himself remained silent, his gaze fixed on Night Stalker, with undisguised hatred. The proceedings continued for several hours, with testimony from the captured infiltration team, station security, and various technical experts. Throughout it all, Night Stalker remained motionless, observing with its usual detached efficiency. Finally, the chairperson called for concluding statements before the committee would deliberate. Before we proceed to final arguments, Ambassador Adira interjected, I believe there is one witness whose perspective would be valuable to these proceedings. All attention turned to Night Stalker as the Predator moved forward with fluid grace. The Maruran consultant has agreed to provide testimony, Ambassador Adira explained. Given its unique position in these events, I believe the committee will find its perspective illuminating. The chairperson's crystalline structure shifted in what might have been surprise. This is unusual, but given the circumstances, we will allow it. Night Stalker, you may address the committee. The Predator stepped forward, its sensory plates realigning as it surveyed the chamber. My contractual agreement with Director Venn specified 3 directives. Night Stalker began, its baritone voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber. Primary, ensure his physical safety. Secondary, protect his commercial interests. Tertiary, maintain discretion. The Predator paused, allowing the information to register. When I detected the infiltration team, I conducted a threat assessment. Upon discovering that Director Venn himself had orchestrated the operation, I faced a contractual paradox. The Director's actions posed a greater threat to his long-term interests than the immediate situation. Venn's membrane darkened with rage. The contract gave me discretionary authority to define my interests. You violated our agreement. On the contrary, Night Stalker responded calmly. The contract specified protection of your interests, not obedience to your instructions when they contradicted those interests. Contract law recognizes this distinction as confirmed by 3 precedent cases in the Alliance legal database. The legal expertise displayed by the Predator clearly surprised many in the chamber. Ambassador Adira smiled slightly, but said nothing. Furthermore, Night Stalker continued, the attempted framing of another species for assassination constitutes a criminal conspiracy, a context in which contractual obligations are superseded by Alliance law, specifically Statute 47.2, regarding interspecies conflict prevention. The chairperson's crystalline structure pulsed with what appeared to be appreciation. Your legal analysis is surprisingly thorough for a security consultant. Maruran education is comprehensive, Night Stalker replied simply. Predatory efficiency requires understanding the systemic constraints within which one operates. After a few more questions, the committee withdrew to deliberate, leaving the chamber in an atmosphere of tense anticipation. Night Stalker returned to its position beside the Earth delegation. That was impressive legal reasoning, Dr. Hale commented quietly. Where did you learn alliance law? All contracts involving Marurans require legal verification prior to blood signing, the Predator explained. It is considered a foundational survival skill. Ambassador Adira leaned closer. Blood signing. Night Stalker's sensory plates shifted in what might have been amusement. A biologically binding component of our contractual tradition. The signatory's blood contains genetic markers that synchronize with neural compliance centers. Ryden raised an eyebrow. So you're physically unable to break a contract? Not unable, the Predator clarified. But violation causes intense neural feedback. However, contextual interpretation is built into our biology. When a contract becomes self-contradictory, alternative compliance pathways activate. The committee returned more quickly than expected. As the members resumed their positions, the chairperson's crystalline structure glowed with increased intensity, a sign of decisive conclusion. After reviewing all evidence, the committee finds Director Marlo Venn guilty of conspiracy, attempted framing of an alliance member species, and violation of summit security protocols, the chairperson announced. His trade director credentials are hereby revoked, and he will be remanded to Zextian authorities for further legal proceedings, according to their internal laws. Venn's membrane became almost transparent with shock. His legal representative began immediately citing procedural objections, but the decision was final. As station security moved to escort the disgraced director from the chamber, Venn locked his gaze on Night Stalker once more. This isn't over, Predator, he hissed his translator, barely processing the venomous tone. The contract is void due to your material breach, Night Stalker interrupted calmly. The blood binding has already dissolved. Your biomarkers have been purged from my system. As Venn was led away, the chamber erupted in discussions about the implications for tomorrow's trade negotiations. The chairperson called for order, announcing a recess until the following morning. Outside the chamber, Night Stalker found itself approached by the Earth delegation. A question remains, Ambassador Adira said without preamble. What are your plans now that your contract has been terminated? The Predator's sensory plates realigned slowly as it considered the question. Uncertain. Return to Marura is an option, though opportunities there are limited for those who have worked off-world. Dr. Hale stepped forward. We might have an alternative proposal. The scientist glanced at the ambassador, who nodded encouragement. Earth's Xenobiology Research Division has been attempting to establish contact with various apex species throughout the Alliance, so far with limited success. Most apex predator species consider humans either prey or competitors, Ryden added, neither conducive to scientific cooperation. Night Stalker's sensory organs focused intently on the humans. Yet you suggest I might be different. Ambassador Adira smiled. You've already demonstrated an unusual capacity for interspecies cooperation and contextual ethical reasoning, qualities we value highly. What exactly are you proposing? The Predator inquired. A research partnership, Dr. Hale explained eagerly. No contracts, no blood binding, no employment hierarchy. A collaborative relationship to study evolutionary convergence between Earth's apex predators and those of other worlds. Night Stalker remained silent for several moments, its sensory plates shifting through complex realignments. The absence of a binding contract is unusual. My species relies on clear parameters. Sometimes the most valuable relationships are those defined by mutual respect, rather than contractual obligation, Ambassador Adira suggested. You chose to protect what you perceived as the greater good even at personal risk. That suggests you value more than mere contractual compliance. The Predator's sensory plates settled into a configuration the humans had not observed before. A trial period would be acceptable, to assess compatibility. Ryden actually smiled. That's all we're asking. As the station prepared for the rescheduled summit the following day, Night Stalker accompanied the Earth delegation to their transport vessel. Station personnel gave the group a wide berth. Rumors of the night's events, having spread rapidly throughout the facility. At the docking bay, Ambassador Adira turned to the Predator. Last chance to reconsider. Earth might not meet your expectations. Night Stalker's sensory plates shifted in what the humans were beginning to recognize as the Maruran equivalent of contemplative amusement. Expectations create limitations. Adaptation is the essence of predatory success. As the group boarded the vessel, Dr. Hale was already outlining research protocols and describing Earth's diverse biomes. Ryden had taken a more practical approach, discussing security clearances and legal considerations for a non-human visitor with Night Stalker's capabilities. The Predator listened attentively, its sensory organs cataloging every detail of the ship, the humans' behaviors, and the possibilities that lay ahead. No blood contract bound it to this path, only the evolutionary recognition of fellow predators, worthy of respect, and the intriguing prospect of a different kind of relationship. As the transport disengaged from the station and set course for Earth, Night Stalker stood at a viewing port watching as Space Station 42 receded into the distance. The Predator's advanced visual organs could still pick out individual details of the structure, where just hours before it had been bound by contract to a being who saw it merely as a tool. "Something on your mind?" Ambassador Adira asked, joining the Predator at the viewport. Night Stalker's sensory plates realigned slightly. "I am contemplating the human concept of choice. My species considers biological imperatives and contractual obligations as primary determinants of action. The idea of partnership based on mutual assessment is novel." The ambassador smiled. "I suspect you'll find Earth full of novel concepts. We're an adaptable species." "Yes," the Predator agreed, its amber sensors shifting from the station to the stars beyond. "That is precisely what makes you dangerous." Ambassador Adira raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous?" Night Stalker's sensory plates shifted in what might have been the closest approximation of a smile its biology allowed. "The highest compliment one apex predator can offer another. Your species lacks obvious weapons, yet you've survived and thrived through adaptability and cooperation. Evolution's most sophisticated strategy." As the ship accelerated toward Earth, Night Stalker felt the last biochemical traces of Ven's contract dissolve from its system. For the first time in its adult life, the Predator was unbound by blood obligation, free to choose its path, based on its own assessment. The sensation was unfamiliar, almost predatory in its possibilities.